Welcome back, everybody. Happy Friday afternoon. You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Web. I'm your host, Jeremiah Fox, here with my esteemed and prolific guest, friend and neighbor, Sam Himmelstein. Before we introduce Sam, the message of the day. It's a little cliche, but I'm a corny guy sometimes. Home is where the heart is. 2 reasons I chose that quote for Sam. The 2 nouns in that statement. First is home. Sam is a tenant lawyer. He's protected many people's homes. He's saved a lot of people from bad situations. New York City living situation can be one of the most treacherous in the world, and Sam has done a great job with that. And the other part is heart. I've met few people with as much heart as Sam. He's just a really amazing, giving dude. Just so much heart. We'll get into a little more of his heart later, but first we're gonna introduce Sam. A little background on Sam. Sam is a graduate of Brooklyn College and the New York Law School. He's a partner in Himmelstein, McDonald, Gribben, Donahue, and Joseph LLP. Did I say that right?
McConnell.
Oh, McConnell.
Yeah.
McDonald,
close,
McConnell.
Close. Yeah, those Irish names.
Yeah,
are
they're all the same.
Yeah.
Where he focuses on individual, residential, and commercial tenant and tenants' rights litigation and representation of tenant associations and cooperative conversions. Sam has represented thousands of tenants in landlord-tenant court, Supreme Court, New York appellate courts, and before state and city administrative agencies. He has written 2 manuals, A Tenant's Guide to Housing Court and How to Get Your Landlord to Correct Violations. We should all read that. And a manual entitled Tenants' Rights and How to Protect Them. You should read that too. Published by the New York City Commission on Human Rights in 1992. Like I said, this guy's got a lot of heart. In his spare time, from 2001 to 2015, Sam was a member of the rock band The Love Handles. It gets more and more interesting. Keyboards and vocals, which he played regularly at the Cutting Room and other venues in Manhattan and Brooklyn. Sam was selected to Super Lawyers in 2019.
Just this year.
These are just a few of his accomplishments. Welcome, Sam.
Hi.
Really awesome to have you on the
Thank
show.
you.
Sam and I lived on the same block for 10 years. We got to know each other in the Windsor Terrace neighborhood of Brooklyn, one of the most amazing neighborhoods in the world. Sam would regularly come into my wine store. We'd talk about music, we talk about wine, and then it mushroomed from there and went into a whole bunch of other topics, which is created a really great relationship over the years. And he's been a huge inspiration and influence to me in a lot of things that I've done. It's really a pleasure to have him here. And Sam is a native New Yorker. He's from Brooklyn. Why don't you tell us where you're from and what it was like when you were growing up?
Oh, yeah. So I grew up in a NYCHA housing project, New York City Housing Authority in Gravesend, Brooklyn.
Isn't that a very close connection to
well,
tenants?
I think that's a big part of why I became a tenant lawyer.
Right.
And I love the name Gravesend. You know, I mean, it's the one neighborhood that hasn't been rebranded, right?
And it sounds so treacherous. It just sounds like the end of the world.
It is. It is. You know, if I were a broker, I'd like rename it Cemetery Hill or something like that.
So if you're looking for an apartment in Brooklyn and you want cheap rent,
that's where you go, right?
You might not have subway access,
right?
But
so when I was growing up, I thought that there were basically 4 ethnic groups: Jews, Italians, blacks, and Hispanics. That I didn't realize there was anything else. Well, yeah, and all of my friends most of them were either Jewish or Italian. And in fact, interesting you bring it up. Tomorrow, I'm going to a reunion of my projects. We called it the projects back then, right?
Sure.
Of my projects friends, and we are going to Coney Island. We're going to start off on the boardwalk. We're going to go walk to the projects, Marlborough Project, where I grew up. And then we're going to go to Spumoni Gardens, which is where we spent a good part of our youth.
Quintessential.
Get us to Square. And
Grandma,
yes.
Definitely.
So that's where I grew. I lived there for 14 years. I went to Lafayette High School.
Is the building still there? Is the project
the project's still there.
Yeah.
It was actually a wonderful place to grow up.
So tell us a little bit about that.
It was well kept. You know, we all think of New York City Housing Authority today as falling apart, full of social problems. The repairs aren't getting done. There's mold, there's leaks. It was basically I would say a working class enclave at the time. And I, looking back on it, I have to believe that it was deliberately segregated, because it was, I would say 90% white.
Mm-hmm.
And there were one or two buildings that seemed to have all the people of color in them.
Yeah.
And
all within the same.
Yeah, it's a huge
project.
place.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a huge
Mm-hmm.
place. I think it had 24 buildings.
Wow.
Most of which were 7 stories, some of which were 16 stories. And there was all this open space. There was benches and grass and parks. And I had an amazing group of friends, and we hung out, and we until the wee hours of the morning, we sat on the stoop. We played cards. We played softball.
Classic era. Right?
And I'm still friends with those people. There was this really, really deep bond. I formed my first band there, which was the 5 Sharps.
Are there 5 Sharps or 5 Flats?
We were 5 Flats, believe me. we were what you called a society band. You remember?
Sure.
Right? So
of course.
we had a sax, a trumpet, a guitar, drums, and a piano. No bass.
No bass.
No bass. And we played a couple of bar mitzvahs.
Yeah.
And we did, Hava Nagila and some show tunes, and I did some singing, and we wore these gold vests and these bossa nova ties.
I actually think I saw a picture
You've seen
of
a
this
picture,
on Facebook.
right?
Yeah.
So we used to get mistaken for the waiters all the time. People would ask us to bring them food.
So, waiter, can I get some water,
Yeah,
please?
right, exactly.
I mean, being a musician myself, I'm a pretty good waiter.
Exactly right. So
I own a restaurant.
You do, a very good one, which you should all check out.
Yeah, checks in the mail.
Yeah.
You forgot the address. No, I'm kidding.
So I went to Hebrew school, even though my father was an atheist and my mother was an agnostic. It's like that old Woody Allen joke. They used to argue about who believed less. And that's actually a line in a Woody Allen movie.
Yeah.
But they were embarrassed. They didn't want me to stick out like a sore thumb and be the only kid in the neighborhood who was bar mitzvah, who was not bar mitzvah.
Oh,
you see,
so you did the process.
In fact, my father was a communist. He was a member of the Communist Party, believe it or not, which makes me what's called a red diaper baby. But they never told me, because in those days, if you said you were a communist, you were like, you wanted to atom bomb the United States, and you liked Castro and Khrushchev and all these horrible people, supposedly. So I didn't find out. I was bar mitzvahed, and when I was 16, I one day was just sitting out on the bench, and I looked up in the sky, and I said to myself, I don't believe in this stuff. I had what I call an anti-religious revelation.
Yeah.
It hit me it wasn't gradual. It was like,
right.
I don't believe in God anymore.
Yeah.
And I went and told my father, and he said, "Oh, now we can talk.
Now we can hang out."
Yeah.
He rolled a joint, cracked open a beer.
Yeah.
It was like, son.
It was like,
finally.
Now I can tell you.
Yeah, I had a similar. I mean, we've had this discussion many times.
Yep.
I grew up in a Protestant household, and they baptized me twice, because they were like, once they couldn't do it
for insurance.
Yeah, they were like, they did it once, and they were like, it didn't take. Look in his eyes. It's really bad.
I love it.
And I was even younger. I was probably like 12, and I remember my mom was a church organist. My parents weren't particularly religious. It wasn't, never discussed in the home. It was, none of that stuff. But we went to church every Sunday because she played, and so we had to tag along. And they grew up kind of in that culture. And I just remember being in there and hearing the sermon one day. And I'm like 12 years old, and same thing. I just look up and I'm like, this is a crock of shit. This has nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
Like, you guys are all saying one thing, but you do a completely different thing.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in getting it done,
Right.
doing
Right.
instead of talking. So
Right.
very, very similar experience. And it has been the spark of many conversations between Sam and I.
Yes.
In fact, it's funny how the serendipity of how the show got started. Do you remember me years ago saying, I want to interview you?
Yes.
I didn't realize it at the time, but this is something that's been brewing
I do
in me
remember that.
for a long
Yes.
time. There was a lot of things I wanted to do with Sam. So Sam and I played together as well. I've
That was a memorable night.
been a sub, and we'll get to that in a little while. I've been a sub in the Love Handles, and you played in David's band as well with me, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I did. I came up and did a couple of songs.
Right.
Yeah.
We played with one of his coworkers, David Hershey Webb, who's an amazing guitarist and singer and lawyer, and writes his own music and produced an album. And I had the pleasure of playing in that with Sam. But Sam has, if you look him up on Facebook, he's got quite the feed.
I don't hold back.
He doesn't hold back. It's entertaining and informative. You might not agree, but that's not really the point. And at one point, we were playing together with some of the same people, Brad Maestas, amazing bass player, and Jeff Nathan, really awesome guitarist as well. And I wanted to do a lounge band based off of Sam's Facebook.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Right.
And called it the Sam Slam, and it would just be like loungy, and we could bring back the gold suits and bow ties. And,
I remember that.
And it was really amazing. But just our conversations there was so much depth to them, and just so much value. And I remember thinking, man, I should interview this guy because he's got so much to say. And it was a cue to me that I was into that idea, and then I just kind of shelved it because I got busy, like having children,
and here you
opening
are,
business and such. And then here we go. And so you were natural, like, gotta have Sam on, like, early too, because it's like manifestation. We've come full circle. So you were talking about the segregation within your housing project, and just you got to see a lot that had to have had a big impact on your choice to pursue this. What were some of the things you saw as a young person that kind of formed your ideas on the way people were living? I mean, you said, you grew up pretty decent, and that was a time that it got rough in New York, like things got bleak, but you could see that other people didn't get dealt the same hand as you.
Well, I mean, my parents, my father being a communist, that meant that my house was, they were involved in the civil rights movement somewhat. And we used to go to civil rights rallies, as a matter of fact. And, when we were watching television and the dogs were attacking people at the lunch count, on the streets and the lunch counters, I was taught that was wrong. And in fact, one day when I was really young, I came home, I had never heard the N-word before. And I was out playing, and they were playing a game, and when you won the game, you got an N baby, right, as a prize, right? And I came home and used the word, and my mother said, if you ever use it again, I'm going to wash your mouth out with soap. And she meant it. It was that was the worst thing you could be in my house, was to be like racist. And so I went to my first anti-war rally with my parents. Most of the kids were sneaking off because their parents wouldn't let them go. But we went together, and I actually remembered the chant back then was "Hell no, we won't go," and my father was chanting "Hell no, he won't go" at the same time, and pointing at me as we were marching down Fifth Avenue.
You won't give up. We won't
go to Vietnam.
Yeah. Oh, gotcha.
Right. So it wasn't a rebellion for me to become, an activist, so to speak, right? It was sort of a natural progression. And so right around the same time when I became an atheist, I also sort of became a hippie and a yippie and an activist. And I became active in the anti-war movement, and my hair got really long, believe it or not. It was actually down to here when I had hair. The headband came on, the torn jeans, the whole thing. But I went to a high school, Lafayette, which was the whitest high school in the city. 5,500 students, 400 blacks. And when we had our anti-war strike for peace in 1968, the counter demonstrators outnumbered us by 2-1. There were 200 of us picketing and 400 of them. And they were calling us commies, and they were saying, what does SDS stand for? Special dick suckers? That. And the police had to escort us home because they were threatening to beat the crap out of us. And the police actually escorted us back to our homes. It was pretty hairy. Which is why in 1971 I got out of that neighborhood. I did not want to be there anymore.
Understood.
Yeah.
So it sounds like empathy was part of your household growing up.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll delve a little deeper into Sam's empathy and maybe a little bit of rock and roll.
Yeah.
We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Web.